Crap. I'm a little concerned that this storm is going to cause interference. My internet bopped out. What? It matches his file name. Is that the right name? Okay. Crimson. No, I shouldn't need to say anything. I'll just be muted the whole time.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome for your first time. If this is your first time, welcome back to the Go Mode Podcast Mentor Tournament 2020. I'm one of your commentators, Ezmar. With me is McMonkey.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, and this is going to be a Week 4 race against OmegAtoisk and CrimsonPallasch, mentored by Trinexx and SEJay.
That's right. Yeah, we've got two racers here who both won in week 1 and have lost the past 2 weeks. So they're looking for redemption here when they get their first crack at an open seed with a mentor.
That's right. We are moving into open seeds now, which means that the rules are going to be about as standard as they come in Randomizer. The item pool is going to be standard. You have the choice of starting either at the Sanctuary or Link's house at the beginning of the game, rather than playing through the opening sequence. Swords are randomized as God intended. And the goal is to defeat Ganon, 7 crystals required to enter the tower, defeat Aghanim 2, and go and fight the big pig.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a good race here. Both of these racers have put up some good times. In week 1, they both put up sub 145 times. So with the seed cooperating here, we could see some good execution and some good times posted. Hopefully it's a close race.
Yeah, I don't think either runner has posted a time above 2.5 hours. CrimsonPallasch came close, but so did his opponent, which I didn't catch that race personally. I don't even know if it was streamed, but it was likely had something to do with the seed they were given.
Yeah, when you see both racers putting up 220 times, then you know something bad happened during the seed.
Yeah, I know we've seen. I've personally casted a few that ended up being a bit more comprehensive than you usually like to see.
Yeah, and right away here, Omega going the Uncle route and the tree pull paying off, giving him some early bombs, and that's going to really help out with the Kakariko routing.
Yeah, meanwhile, on the right side, we see CrimsonPallasch in an Eternal Darkroom. I'm assuming having some technical difficulties. So we'll have to wait and see what routing they are going to be favored. OmegAtoisk not seeing anything he's particularly excited about, and forgoes the dive down into Hyrule Castle to go straight to Sanctuary, presumably swing through Lost Woods, or perhaps even straight to Kakariko. High density check.
Yeah, that's right. And looking like he's deciding to forego the lumberjack check now, which is a pretty standard decision here to save a little bit of time, try to route it in later, maybe with bumper ledge if he gets the mirror, or even just waiting until you have boots to know whether you should check lumberjack.
And over on the right side here, we've got CrimsonPallasch in much the same place. Maybe a little ahead on picking up that red rupee. Interesting, we do see both runners picking it up. That can be an item that you can leave, but this early in the game, we want to see some money, and kind of doesn't end up paying off as we get 100 rupees from the forest dropdown.
Yeah, as it turns out, it didn't matter in this case, but it's always good to start putting pennies in the piggy bank for Zora.
Or even potentially for bombs, because sometimes you don't end up finding any bombs, and we see Omega getting a tree pull there.
Oh, and looks like the technical difficulties we had with Crimson are starting to clear up. Maybe just some network latency going on. We've got a little bit clearer picture, and we see him clearing out Blind's Hut now. And not a bad pickup for the first item in Blind's Hut. Getting that fire rod early is certainly convenient.
Yeah, as well as our first sword. Now, bear in mind, these early checks are pretty much going to be givens for both runners. We're not going to be seeing much difference in routing here. The early game checks, you tend to get through them all one way or another. So it's really going to be after this first couple minutes that we're really going to start seeing some interesting developments.
Yeah, especially with having picked up bombs. There's some discussion on the Discord about different opening routes, whether or not you pick up bombs. Should you save and quit after Lost Woods and go South Shore or South route to the village? But you end up getting all the same checks in the end.
Yeah, the South Shore in particular contains Mini Moldorm Cave, which does contain a slight combat challenge, which is a little rough if all you've got to work with are bombs. Kind of hope you run into a weapon of some sort before. And we've got both rods for both runners, which means that if Turtle Rock comes into the picture, Trinexx will be on notice.
No bottle, no flute, which are things you'd like to see in Kakariko ideally. So they're going to have to work their way back around here a little bit later.
See the Cane of Samaria in the library, which means that is going to be locked behind the boots. The Pegasus boots are required to get that item. So we're going to need to come back for that, because that is a required item for 2 dungeons. It's possible that you don't need it, but you can need it for Misery Mire, Turtle Rock, and the right side of Ganon's Tower.
And it sure does make Ice Palace a whole lot easier as well. Yeah, so I would think that's got to be a good thing. Seeing something on the library that you're probably going to need in the seed tells you that sooner or later you're going to get boots, which is always a nice bonus.
Or on the flip side, it could mean that you've got to do the whole seed without boots, without Samaria, and you have to do Ice Palace the slow way. If both Misery Mire and Turtle Rock end up being pendants, that can be a possibility.
Yeah, we got it.
So,
We
yeah.
had a quick map check. We see the Desert Palace is a pendant, and the other two Light World dungeons are crystals. We don't have the item set to clear anything at the moment, so I imagine we'll just see the rest of these South Shore, Ice Rod Cave, Mini Moldorm Cave.
Yeah, interesting note about Ice Rod Cave in particular. There are a couple of checks that are kind of easy to route in, and others that aren't quite so easy. Ice Rod is one of those ones that you sometimes see runners leave until maybe later, hope they don't need whatever's inside, because it is quite a ways out there. The same thing with Agina's cave in the desert. That can be easily wrapped up with some checks in the desert later with Mirror, the checkerboard cave on top, mirroring from Mire area. So if you can, you like to save that check until later, just because the routing works out a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, although the more of these checks that they go through without getting any item that moves them towards Dark World access, the less likely they're going to want to orphan those checks.
Yeah, and speaking of hoping to find progression items, one of the things that it seems very easy to forget in randomizer is that dungeon items can, like in the original game, contain the item you need to clear them. Sometimes runners get too focused on waiting for progression before they even start a dungeon, just because that's the most efficient way. And with the mentors on deck, I doubt we're going to see any of that. We see the bow and the glove, both nice items to see. Both glove upgrades.
Yeah, that is a stacked Mini Moldorm Cave, and I'm going to once again propose that we rename Mini Moldorm Cave to the real Hype Cave.
I mean, it's certainly a little quicker to, well, not quite. Well, you have to fight the mini Moldorms, but in this case, the rewards are well worth it.
Yeah, and looking like both runners are choosing to go up to Ice Rod
The
Cave.
crab. The crab gets a Toisk. They'll get you early game. They do 2 hearts of damage for some reason, some bizarre, strange reason.
Yeah, so now they're hoping that there's nothing of value in Ice Rod Cave, and in this case, that's going to work out.
Yeah, that is one of the things that you usually will see if a runner takes a death on the way to a check. You'll usually see them skip it rather than double down and try again.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to invest that amount of time trying to get back to a single check like that, particularly if they're going to get the Ice Rod the flute and boots later on. That'll make checking Ice Rod Cave a lot quicker.
Yeah, or potentially the flippers. There's a pretty convenient warp. We've got Moon Pearl, and with the mitts, that gives us our Dark World access, so we can not only go to the Dark World but actually do something once we get there. So that's pretty exciting on OmegAtoisk's side. CrimsonPallasch close behind. We'll be seeing that shortly.
Yeah, very quick Dark World access, under 10 minutes.
Certainly a welcome sight if you've been having seeds where you're just waiting on Moon Pearl for the half of the seed.
Is this the sort of start that starts making you paranoid that something bad is going to happen later?
Oh, for me, always. I always feel like a quick start means that the useful checks are going to dry up at some point. And so unless you're lucky, that ends up happening around the midpoint. You sort of have to hope that your routing's good and make quick decisions later on, since your options are all sort of open to you right at the start here.
Yeah, particularly with the mitts being the Dark World access, that opens up a lot of the world. It opens a lot more checks than a hammer and glove combo would. So they're both following the logical path here, clearing out Eastern. After this point, we might start to see some divergence.
Yeah, I feel as soon as we see either Mirror plus Hammer or Hookshot, we see both of these runners go up to Death Mountain, because with that, with Moon Pearl and the Titan's Mitts, that becomes a very, very rich area. Hookshot would be more desirable. And it looks like neither of them phased by the fact that they have not seen the lamp yet. It is logically required to complete this dungeon, but it's a fairly forgiving set of dark rooms in Eastern Palace. And with the bow, there's really no real reason to put this one off.
Yeah, in general, the execution level in the Mentor tournament has been very high. We've got a lot of runners who are very familiar with the top 10 tricks worth knowing, and a few others that didn't make the cut for this year.
Yeah, chat pointing out that we did see the half magic show up, which is always a nice thing to have, especially not knowing what the Ganon fight is going to look like. You suddenly start sweating if you haven't found it. Silvers too. Okay, well, I was just about to say, if the runners have to fight Ganon silverless, you generally want to have that half magic, but with silvers that's going to be much less of an issue. Of course, they have them both, so they're going to be probably feeling pretty comfortable about the Ganon fight no matter what happens.
Yeah, and as Raids in chat pointed out, the Fire Rod does put this full dungeon in logic, since the big key was not on the lamp locked side.
That's true. I can never hit those torches. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't hit them. I find it actually impossible to hit them in that room at the Igors. So I just don't even bother trying. I just shoot them in the dark. Which is almost as fast than being able to see what you can do.
Yeah, if you've got a good setup for it, then I could see that being just about as fast.
Oh, I don't have a setup. I just pray.
So, some would consider that a setup.
A setup of sorts. Yeah, silver is about the best item you could see before fighting Armos. Take one arrow each as opposed to...
Yeah, and finding them this early will really allow the benefits of the silvers to pay out. There's quite a few bosses that go down a lot faster with the silvers.
Yeah, about the only bosses that don't get taken out by a single shot with silver arrow, if they're vulnerable to arrows at all, is Vitreous, and that's about it. That's about the only boss that can be damaged by arrows that isn't taken down by a single... And, of course, Ganon, but that's to be...
It would be a pretty boring fight if he went down to a single silver arrow.
We're checking the back of Escape here on the left side here. 3 chests. Can be a treasure trove. Not much note. But not... Now, where do you see them going next? Without any obvious dungeons to clear, where do you see them going for overworld?
Well, I think getting to the Dark World, seeing what the map looks like, so that they know what items they're likely to need, it makes the most sense. There's quite a few checks in Village of Outcasts heading down around towards Stumpy and Hype Cave. They can pick up a lot of items and get the critical information about which dungeons are crystals.
Yeah, I spoke a little too soon about the dungeons. Forgetting that we had Moon Pearl this early is certainly a rarity. And Thieves Town is now completely clear.
Yeah, without the hammer, they won't be able to get to the big chest of Thieves Town, but they can certainly beat blind and pick up the prize if it is a crystal. We did see from Sahasrara that our green pendant is Ice Palace, which
it's about the worst pendant you could have in Ice Palace, but it's always nice to see that Ice Palace is potentially non-required. It's a lot better since Icebreaker was developed, but it's still a little bit of a rude dungeon when it comes to the ice physics.
Yeah, and what it does is it says that the runners are going to have to find boots, because either Mire or Turtle Rock, if not both, will be crystals. and it looks like they both are crystals, with our last pendant being Swamp, and our red crystals being the Village of Outcast area, Skull Woods, and Thieves Town.
Yeah, a lot of the time, the boots are an optional item, being potentially required only by one possible Ganon's Tower big key location and one location in Desert Palace. However, since we know that the Cane of Samaria is behind boots, we know that it's going to be required for a hell of a lot more than that.
Yeah, and both red crystals fully accessible to them right now. So, it's possible that they could pick up both of those crystals, work their way around to Hype Cave, and check Pyramid Fairy fairly early, although without the hammer. They'd have to do some tricks along the way to get it there.
Now, diving into Thieves Town, we see the big key in the first check. Both runners still neck and neck right now. Yeah, and looking at the timers, we're synced up. Sometimes there's a little bit of delay, making one runner appear a little bit further ahead or behind, but that's not looking to be the case right now. They both look fairly on pace with each other.
Yeah, no divergence yet. And we've got Satis Sadist in chat asking what the point of checking with Sahasrahla is when you're going to check the map anyway. I didn't know that, and I asked the same question of my mentor when he suggested I ask Sahasrahla during my last race, and what he said, and it makes a lot of sense, is by knowing which one is the green pendant, it could affect which Dark World portal you go to once you have access. In this case, they only had access to the Village of Outcast portal, but if you end up with Hammer and Glove, it may change your routing based on which one is the green pendant.
It looks like both runners taking what looks like perhaps an intentional death warp. Yes, as we see OmegAtoisk walk right out, followed closely behind by CrimsonPallasch. They found the cape in there, which in my opinion would be a great item to see as you're going into an early blind fight, since it's some nice extra insurance. But looks like our runners have other plans.
Yeah, it seems like they don't want to be orphaning a check in the big chest and would rather just come back when they have the hammer.
It makes perfect sense, since Thieves Town is, I would say, probably the quickest dungeon to return to.
Yeah, and not very punishing, covering the same ground that they already did. A quick dig game today, just 5 digs gets the prize, but only a blue rupee for their trouble.
Yeah, it's a little strange without the game audio there. It looks like that could have just been a regular blue rupee, but there is a sound cue when the prize comes out of the ground, so the runners know, we don't. There's a little bit of a visual cue to it. It does pop out a little bit slower.
Yeah, and of course the sprite will hold it up once it collects the prize, even if it's only 5 rupees. So our runner's still in lockstep here. Taking Jeremiah on the world tour, showing him Stumpy's Grove. Gonna go for a little tour past Swamp Palace and over to Hype Cave, and then finally bring him to the Sanctuary and home, I imagine.
Yeah, it seems a little odd at first glance, since obviously the intent is for you to walk him straight back into Village of Outcasts, go back to Kakariko, and return him to his home. But without the mirror, this route actually makes a lot of sense, since you have to save and quit to get back to the Light World anyway. You may as well do these checks while you're already south of.
Yeah, and as it turns out, you can take Jeremiah a number of places, including, if you set things up properly, you could drop into the Ganon fight with him.
We find Flippers in Hype Cave over on the left side here.
And the hookshot.
It's a nice progression item. Fake Flippers can alleviate a little bit of it, but you do run the risk of going on a wild goose chase. I have won a ladder race before where my opponent fake flippered in a seed where flippers were not required, so they ended up on a little bit of a wild ride.
Yeah, and with that hookshot, as you pointed out earlier, that's going to open up all of East Death Mountain and Dark Death Mountain. A lot of checks available to them now.
And it's very nice to do that all in one go. And also, we are kind of running a little bit scant on items we'd actually like to see before completing the game. We're waiting on Flute, Hammer, Samaria, and Mirror. I think that would be all that we would need to see. Mirror may not be required since Swamp Palace is a pendant.
Plus whatever medallions are required to open Mire and Turtle Rock.
Yeah, that's true. We certainly can't open any of them. So a lot of the time you can just hope. But it's not really going to be an option for either of these runners since they don't have any.
I have been in the unenviable position of thinking I was in go mode and forgetting all about the entrance medallions.
Yeah, anytime I still need a couple items to finish Turtle Rock, and I go up there and I happen to have the medallion, I take it as a sign, hope the item I need is in there, and every time I've done it, it's paid off. So we see Crimson turning in the Smith a little bit earlier than OmegAtoisk over here, electing to go up towards the cat.
Really getting his money's worth, Jeremiah, on this tour.
Now, in my mind, I don't know if this is their logic at all, but in my mind, I'm going up here hoping, okay, if Catfish happens to be the mirror that we need, then this is real nice routing, because then you can take that straight to Waterfall Ferry, Zora, and take the warp back to the lake. It's really nice, but it's kind of a long shot.
Yeah, you're hoping there's something of value here, because this is not a route that I think most runners are going to take.
And we see the Master Sword. It's not as convenient as the mirror would be, but it's definitely worth the trip here.
Yeah, that'll make some of the dungeons that they have to do a little safer, a little quicker.
And it also is a required item. You do need to get at least 2 sword upgrades before you finish out the game.
Ooh, and unfortunately, the shovel on Lumberjack is it's an awkward item to have there, because
probably one of the most stressful items you can see, because it's one of those items that's worth very little except one other item, so you never know if it's useful or not. Of course, the Lumberjack item requiring you defeat the first Aghanim battle in order to obtain it, since the Lumberjacks are still busy sawing that tree until the wizard goes down.
The one thing I like about Atoisk's routing here on the left is that currently navigating around the Dark World and even getting to the Dark World is a pretty slow process. There's no flute, there's no boots. To get down towards the pyramid is going to take a lot of time, so to make those checks while they can may be smart. Now, if the flute turns up or if the hammer turns up pretty quickly on the mountain here, then I take it all back and I'll be results oriented.
Yeah, the flippers being one item that you can use to access the Palace of Darkness area in the absence of the hammer. The main ways to get access to that part of the Dark World would be flippers from the north side, hammer from the south, or defeating Aghanim 1 and using the portal straight from the pyramid. We see a medallion on top of Spectacle Rock.
Yeah, and the last way being a splash delete or kern jump from the North Dark World route.
Right, that's functionally the same as flippers, but a little more sneaky. We see a OmegAtoisk finally going back for Ice Rod Cave here. A little bit unfortunately, as we know. There's not but a piece of heart in there. And he's only got one, so it's not even gonna... The poor guy.
Meanwhile, Crimson on the right here is clearing out Paradox Cave. We'll see if there's anything of value in these 7 checks.
Yes, 7. It's the single most valuable location in the entire game. The other day, actually, no, it was just this morning. I was playing a multi-world, and I somehow forgot to do the ones on top.
Now, which side is the top?
That's the question, isn't it? You'd think it would be this one, but you walk out the door, and there you are at the bottom. And that is the third sword upgrade we've seen. So we may actually see CrimsonPallasch not actually ever check the catfish. Since he might be perfectly fine with just that Master Sword.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest check to leave behind, leave for last when you're searching for a needed item.
Yeah, and on the flip side, OmegAtoisk is almost certainly going to get that, and as well as Flute on Hobo. That's another check that's kind of easy to skip. It's not hard to route in, but it's one that you can make a snap decision to not spend the time on. It's not going to be a smart idea here, but as I was saying, OmegAtoisk is almost certainly going to be picking up that Tempered Sword, which makes the Ganon fight a whole lot faster than if you just have the Master Sword. So if that's the last sword upgrade we see, that's going to be a major difference between these runners, unless Crimson finds that a sword upgrade on the catfish.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, Vortex, or Restreamer, points out that these flippers checks are in logic, whereas any of these checks on the mountain would not necessarily be. However, since we did see the flute, logical mountain access is available given the current item loadouts. However, it does pay off in spades for OmegAtoisk here.
Yeah, and now OmegAtoisk is going to be able to flute down to the mire area, see what the required medallion is there, go up to Dark Death Mountain. We'll see from Crimson in a second here what the required medallion is for Turtle Rock, and they'll have full information of what they need and whether or not they're in go mode once they find those items.
Yeah, I think the most painful thing to see here would be OmegAtoisk finding Mirror. See if OmegAtoisk checks Mire, sees its Quake, and then finds the mirror in Mire Shed, hypothetically, that would be absolutely awful for Crimson.
Even finding the hammer down in Mire area would allow OmegAtoisk to clear Tower of Hera. He's got the book now. He could check the Ether tablet while he's up there. So it opens up a little bit more if he's able to find that item.
So we've got OmegAtoisk on the left here, activating that flute. Requires activation. Battery's not included, as CrimsonPallasch shows us what's in Hookshot Cave.
Speak of the hammer, and it shall appear.
So again, that might seem good for CrimsonPallasch here, but again, that's another check that OmegAtoisk is not going to end up skipping. So, and we see Bombos for Turtle Rock.
Yeah, and without the mirror, Crimson not able to just swap back over and go into Tower of Hera. If they want to do that, they'll have to start back at the old man and work their way all the way around again.
Yeah, right now that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense just to clear that dungeon. So if you can, it can be really nice to leave that until the very last dungeon you do before Ganon's Tower, since right as you walk out the front door, you could leave a portal there, you know, walk right back in. Doesn't happen often that you have the opportunity to do that.
But it feels so good when you can do both Turtle Rock and Tower of Hera right before GT.
It looks like Crimson's going back into the Dark World, seeming to not value those flipper checks as much as OmegAtoisk seemed to.
Yeah, I think they're focused on clearing crystals. They can clear Thieves Town now. They've got a bunch more health, so I imagine they would feel more comfortable clearing Skull Woods at this point as well.
Particularly, Skull Woods is a little bit riskier. Your weaponry doesn't help you much against Blind, since he just takes a static 9 hits no matter what you're using against him. Mothula, on the other hand, is a bit of a different beast. We're going to be seeing OmegAtoisk getting the Tempered Sword before his Mothula fights.
Yeah, that hammer does make a difference, though. Even with the Master Sword, if they're comfortable getting hammer hits on the Moth, then that'll shorten the fight significantly. And anything you can do to shorten the Moth fight is good.
Yeah, and even having just half magic and the fire rod is usually enough for most people to feel safe in that
Yeah, that's
fight.
a good point.
It's still...
The mini Moldorm's not behaving today.
And we see OmegAtoisk doing those same checks we just saw Crimson do. And meanwhile, Crimson on the right, giving us a glimpse into what lays ahead in...
Yeah, and I'm kind of digging the palette here for Thieves Town. It's a nice combo.
Yeah, we've got a lot of the world collectively open to us between these two runners. There are still quite a few differences. Notably, Crimson hasn't done any of those flippers checks. Doesn't have the flute, which outside of the boots is probably the handiest item to have for cleaning up your routing and having a quicker seed. Because after OmegAtoisk here is done with the Death Mountain checks, he will be able to choose from any of 8 spots on the world to instantly warp to, whereas Crimson really only has the 3 from the save and quit, one of which doesn't really get him off the mountain.
Crimson on the right doing a good job with the first couple phases of blind. And getting a little bit off script, but taking down blind fairly efficiently. That was a good fight.
We see OmegAtoisk displaying a little bit of tech on the right. The fastest way to get through that is with the mirror. You can delete the blocks. Second fastest is with the hookshot, and it's a little tricky, but you can skip the second set of blocks with the hookshot as well. It takes some tricky timing, but pulls it off very well. I imagine we're seeing Crimson going into, going up to check bumper cave ledge. 50 rupees, not interested. Heads back down, presumably into Skullwoods. That's what I would guess here.
Yeah, I would have to think the same.
And with that, Crimson will have defeated Blind and Mothula, which will open up... Again, something you don't necessarily always see so early.
And maybe a spike cave check here on Omega's side on the left. Crimson on the right here,
Again,
going right to the back of Skullwoods, which makes a lot of sense, because if you can find both items in the back here or get the big key, it makes clearing the front a lot more efficient, or maybe not even necessary.
Yeah, I was gonna point out on the left, OmegAtoisk, like Crimson before him, foregoing Tower of Hera and going straight to the Dark World, from which there is no return without the mirror. And again, it's not a particularly item-rich dungeon, so since we know we've got to climb Ganon's tower anyway, we have one more guaranteed mountain climb. So between that and Turtle Rock, it probably makes sense to bank on maybe only needing to make 2 total trips.
Yeah, that would definitely be the hope.
Crimson getting really nice luck on those magic drops. Gonna have a pretty easy time with Mothula despite only having the Master Sword.
And it looks like Omega is going to be following somewhat in Crimson's footsteps here, although that flute demonstrating how quickly they can make up some ground, fluting right over to 3 and hopping in that portal instead of having to save and quit and make the slow walk from Sank.
And they are opting to go Skullwoods first, which is different to what we're seeing on the right side, which is a little surprising to see a full magic bar, the fire rod equipped, and going for Master Sword spins here. And not even needing that fire rod. Yeah, that boss is a little bit strange in that the damage can get overwritten if the boss hits the spikes. So if you knock the boss into the spikes, your attacks don't do the amount of damage they're supposed to. It's a very strange fight. I've always said half of the boss is the arena itself. Meanwhile, on the left, OmegAtoisk finds one of the crucially a non-dungeon item, one of the 2 that exist in Skull Woods, a red rupee.
And they high-five each other on their way by. Yeah, I like Omega's routing here, starting with Skullwoods, heading down to Thieves Town. If the plan is to go down and check Pyramid Ferry, Pyramid area afterwards, then this route makes a little bit more sense. It doesn't save a ton of time, but it's little optimizations that add up to be quite a bit of time in the end.
Yeah, and I wasn't paying attention necessarily to what items we saw in the back section, but evidently we did not see both of the dungeon items, since we see Crimson dropping down to continue to explore Skull Woods here.
No, but we did see the big key, which is where Crimson is going to check first on the front side. And we'll see on Omega's side how Moth can be a much faster fight with the Tempered Sword, although he's got to avoid doing tempered spins because those won't do any damage to Moth. The gold sword is in the same damage class as the spikes, and so the programming for Moth makes him immune to that damage class. And of course, when you do tempered spins, you increase your damage to gold sword damage class, and hence will do no damage to Moth. But a nice fight by Omega. He gets his crystal, and we have 3 crystals apiece now. And on the right, we have the feels bad hammer pegs. It's always unfortunate to be doing hammer pegs without the boots. It just feels abysmally slow when you're doing it. Chat asking about the gold sword damage being fixed for Moth. They did fix the damage for the gold sword itself, but not for tempered sword spins, which are gold sword class, but don't count as gold sword itself. So the fix is only for gold sword slashes.
Yeah, ordinarily in the vanilla game, Fighting Mothula with the gold sword would be not impossible, since you could grab the item and just sort of get out and come back and do it last after you clear Ice Palace and Misery Mire, but you'd have very little reason to.
Gary's lunchbox just having a piece of heart today.
And here we see Crimson giving us our first look into the desert area. A little bit unfortunate, since OmegAtoisk is the one with all of the items that let him actually do things around here.
Yeah, Agina's Cave not too far out of the way, given that they were turning in the lunchbox anyway. But not going to be able to follow it up with Desert Palace or the Desert Ledge.
Yeah, given the items that Crimson has, it's a good time to check it. Not really worth putting it off until later in case it's an item that you're desperately looking for.
And it looks like we'll get our Pyramid Fairy check on Crimson's side on the right here.
Yeah, I'm so curious still to see what the Mire medallion is going to be, because if it's not Quake, then we may yet not need to see the mirror. It's always an interesting seed when you don't see one of the items that is almost given. Hammer is a given. Titan's mitts are a given, just because there's too much that require you to have those items. But there are a few that if all the cards line up just right, you may not need to pick them up to finish the game.
Yeah, and it can be very confusing when you find seeds like that, where it's a very rare case. It can be hard to reason around it, and these mentors, I'm sure, will be able to help them learn the ins and outs of those sort of seeds. And surprisingly, nothing of value in the Pyramid Fairy, with it being available so early. You would almost think there has to be something of value there, but just getting some green goo to fill the bottle. That's about the most valuable thing they found.
Yeah, it's looking like we're going to see Crimson going over towards Palace of Darkness.
Yeah, it makes sense. There are quite a few checks there, and it's a crystal that can be cleared, full clear the dungeon here. So, rather than going to different overworld checks, you might as well pick up the crystal and hope that you find what you need while you're at it.
Yeah, and at this stage in the tournament, we're not going to be seeing too many of our runners holding out for Lamp. Most of these runners have done the Dark Rooms without it enough times by now that they're not going to let it hold them back from routing their seed efficiently.
Yeah, and the mentors in the tournament doing a great job of encouraging the runners to stretch their comfort boundaries a little bit and maybe try some things they wouldn't have ordinarily.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in with newer, less experienced runners. You can lose a race just by not being comfortable enough to fight Ganon without the silvers. You just have to waste time looking for it. If you can fight Ganon without silvers, without anything above the Master Sword, if you can do that, you could potentially save a lot of time.
That doesn't mean you have to like it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you have to like it. So it'll be interesting to watch our right side here because OmegAtoisk is simply retreading the ground we saw Crimson do not 10 minutes ago, I want to say.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Now, Palace of Darkness can be a really interesting dungeon. It's got a lot that's locked behind different things. So depending on your item loadout when you enter it, different areas of it can be accessible. We see Crimson opting to go this route and head over to the bow-locked side, whereas if perhaps you're waiting on the bow, there's a back entrance that you need the bow to get past. You would probably have seen him continue on and go straight to the back since the bow isn't needed back there. We find Ether. It's not the medallion we need for Turtle Rock, but it could be Misery Myers.
Yeah, I'm sure with having checked Turtle Rock, they're looking and hoping for Bombo's medallion, and just hoping that Misery Mire will be Bombo's as well.
Yeah, given that it's Turtle Rock, that's usually something you're it's like, oh, it'll show up in time. That's usually the last thing you have everything in your pocket for. But with both rods, Titan's mitts, hammer, all of those are available. We know where Samaria is, so all we're waiting on is those boots to go grab it, and then Turtle Rock is...
OmegAtoisk doing a very good job on the left, taking down Blind fairly painlessly and picking up their third crystal.
Yeah, so I imagine we're going to see fairly similarly to Crimson's routing. We're going to see there might be a little bit of divergence on the purple chest turn-in, but logically it would make a lot of sense to go to purple chest into Pyramid Fairy into Palace of Darkness.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If they had a mirror to go back into the light world, checking Meyer's shed, checking out the Meyer medallion would make a lot of sense. But since they're already in the dark world, going all the way around to Pyramid Fairy is the logical thing to do here.
Yeah, especially if you've got something you can do on your way. Usually you like to avoid having a lot of travel time if you don't have something you can do with it. Oh, I think that looks like Trinexx maybe convinced him to leave purple chest for now. Maybe checking out Meyer first.
No, I think he's just taking the purple.
No,
he can't
that's
mirror.
right, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that. I got so locked into our suggestion that he was gonna swing all the way around.
It still makes sense since he'll be walking right by the Dark World portal that's on the way to Pyramid, on the way to Pod.
Yeah, and we're seeing the flute. Yeah, we're checking desert here.
So we'll finally get our look at the Meyer medallion.
Yeah, it makes sense to jump down and check the item on the ledge there, since with book in hand, that item is completely accessible. If it's something you want, if for example it's the boots or the mirror, instead of flying back up to the ledge and going to the dark world, you want to get right into desert and go grab that. But as it is, 20 rupees is not quite as enticing, so Meyer it is. Bug catching net, very effective for putting fairies in bottles and also defeating dark wizards. Not much else though. And we see Crimson on the right going through this dark maze. Now, navigating these dark rooms is simultaneously a little bit easier than it looks, but at the same time, way harder than it might appear. If it's done well, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's not as easy as they make it look. You have so little information to go by. Usually, the screen scrolling is the main thing that you don't expect to miss, but do.
Yeah, and that can, of course, be compounded if you get hit by an enemy, you get thrown off course. It can be a little bit hard to then echolocate yourself in the room to figure out where you are in the maze. But
yeah, especially
Crimson doing a good job.
A large room like that, too, when you're in the middle of it and you're moving up and down, you don't see the the sword trails moving up and down. You see the sword trails, the sparks trailing behind it. It's very disorienting when you do it for the first time, especially since the vanilla game forces you to get the lamp before you ever even enter a dark room. The game gives you 3 opportunities to pick one up, and if you pass them all up, Zelda just won't help you push the throne aside.
Unfortunately, Crimson taking a death in the Dark Maze, although that may have been intentional to death warp back to the beginning.
Yeah, I would say that it's intentional. I've done that Dark Maze enough times to know that it's a little frustrating to open up that chest and see, oh man, I've still got most of my hearts left.
So with Mystery Mire being Ether on the medallion, and OmegAtoisk about to pick up their Ether medallion in the basement here in Pod, that leaves us just a couple items short of Go mode.
Yeah, it would have been nice to hit Pod first, but getting that information is crucial, and especially since Crimson does pick up that medallion before heading to Mire to check it, but that's of course because Crimson can't head to Mire to check it, lacking both the flute and the book. So, man, those flippers checks really paying off in spades for Omega. It's even a little bit rare with to not see even fake flippers used to do some of those checks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leaves OmegAtoisk basically boots away, boots and bombos away, I should say, with the red cane being on the library shelf.
Yeah, and so also with Quake not being required for either dungeon, that could mean we never see it. Perhaps it's in the validation chest.
We did see it on top of Spectacle Rock, where we would need the mirror to get it.
We saw Quake. Yeah, we saw Quake on the top of Spectacle Rock, but I'm pointing out that we may not see the mirror.
Oh, that's very true, yeah. Crimson doing a good job with just the fire rod in the dark fighting the turtles. That's not an easy torch to hit.
Yeah, I recently did that room for the first time in the dark without the lamp, and I'd forgotten there were torches in that room at all. Just sort of flailed around with the hammer until they were all dead. Wasn't quick. Now, Crimson still only with the Master Sword, but against Helmasaur with silver arrows, that doesn't make really a... Oh, well, it shouldn't.
Choosing to forego the silver arrows for 5 or 6 Master Sword slashes.
Yeah, still a very quick fight. And there's Bombos. Both of our necessary medallions in the Palace of Darkness.
So once they get their Helma fight, Omega on the left will just need to find the boots and they'll be good to go. Crimson needing to do those flipper checks, as we've said a couple times now.
Yeah, so it's looking very nice to see that god routing. You know, last 2 dungeons, Turtle Rock into portal in front of Hera, do Hera, come out, go straight up GT. Something you love to be able to do. It feels so primally satisfying. Of course, we could see the boots in Tower of Hera.
Yeah, that would be unfortunate. And Crimson giving us our first look at the back of Escape, the front of Escape here. This is a check that, of course, is required in an Ambrosia or a standard start, but can be very easy to forget about in an open seed.
Yeah, going down into the dungeons is a lot more attractive when you have the mirror, but at almost an hour in, you're sort of done waiting around for the mirror to show up. You don't want to leave these 3 chests unopened.
Yeah, that's right. And with Dark Cross, it is in logic with the fire rod, so that makes it 4. Although, with having already checked the back, we know at least one of those was going to be the key.
Yeah, it is a little puzzling that Crimson and his mentor have not done any of those flippers checks yet. At this point, I almost have to wonder if they're just doubling down on their decision to not do it earlier and hoping it doesn't bite them. And there's our lamp. So luckily, we won't have to suffer through any more dark rooms on Crimson's side, as we see OmegAtoisk in the dark maze, suffering through it.
Yeah, it may be that they were really hoping to get the mirror to route in the Zora checks with Catfish together.
I'm sort of selfishly hoping that Crimson doesn't even check Catfish. I want to see that. I want to see that sword difference at the end of the game. It's always exciting to see a difference in equipment.
And Team Red Boomerang can celebrate, as we find it in Zelda's cell.
Yeah, no Zelda, though. She's already safe in the Sanctuary.
Now, are you Team Red Boomerang or Team Blue Boomerang?
Well, for style points, I gotta go with blue. For pure functionality, though, red all the way. The blue is a little more restrained too. It doesn't go wildly off until you can't see it anymore before coming back. It sort of keeps itself reined in. And with that lamp, we're going to see Crimson go through and check the Dark Cross chest, so named because the room it is in is dark and shaped like a cross. Now this is logically accessible with the fire rod, since every room does have a torch or two. It's not the kindest thing, though.
And just the Cane of Burna, which is a nice safety to have, although, some of its value, probably all the dungeon where it's most useful is in the blind fight. It's still nice to have in the back pocket.
Yeah, Garrison in chat pointing out, since Crimson found the lamp, now all of their mountain checks, everything they got up there, would have been considered out of logic, since they don't know where that flute is. Now they're finally getting around to these water checks. Sort of waiting with bated breath. Okay, they opt to not go and
It
skip
looked like a
Hobo,
close thing there.
which we know is a wise choice. I was worried for a second that he was going to, Hobo's probably nothing. I've done it myself a number of times. It's rarely bitten me, but
It's just one check. How could I have something important?
I seem to be more often bitten by the checks that seem completely obvious. And that is not something you want to see an hour in.
No, and there was the briefest pause, perhaps shock, perhaps thinking of what to do next, discussing with CJ.
Because that's something you don't know. It's possible your opponent is on par with you. It's always possible that your opponent has made every single decision that you've made. But when you find something like Flute an hour into the run, and it's been available for 40 minutes already, that's when you have to start thinking, okay, what do I skip? What can I afford to not check? Because I need to save time somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. You start thinking about more aggressive routing, going for, not quite Hail Marys at this point, but maybe just trying to optimize a little bit.
And we're going to see if Omega goes straight for Meyer, or decides to check Hyrule Castle. If they check Hyrule Castle, they're going to find that lamp, which is going to make the Meyer Dark Room quite a bit easier. However, I wouldn't be surprised to see, okay, I've got some items. Well, actually, no, they're still waiting on Cane of Samaria, so the Dark Room right now for Misery Meyer is going to be very, very difficult, I would wager.
Yeah, I think after doing a couple of these checks, the decision is really going to be: do you take another trip up the mountain, the long way around to Hera, to get the crystal and hope it's there? There's only 2 items. Or do you just bite the bullet and go into swamp with the 6 items that are guaranteed to be in there?
Yeah, we see Omega checking Agina, which we saw on Crimson's side a while back when Crimson turned in the purple chest. Collects those 5 rupees. Decides to save and quit. Perhaps it's a little faster to go to the main entrance from the flute spot than climbing back out the cave.
With the save and quit delay,
looks like they're going up to the castle. So.
Yeah, and I think with having removed the save and quit delay in the latest update, it makes it a lot closer in terms of timing walking out of Agina's cave versus a save and quit. Yeah, and the other nice thing about not seeing the mirror so far, there's quite a few awkward checks with the North Dark World route, Cave 45, that are accessible with the mirror checkerboard cave. They're not fun checks to do, and so if you never find the mirror, that does make the routing a little nicer.
Yeah, we haven't seen that north side of Hyrule yet, but a King's Tomb is available now. Since we have the Titan's Mitts. It can be accessed without the Titan's Mitts if you have mirror. So it can be easy to sort of lump those all into mirror checks. Go in the Dark World mirror back if you've got the boots to check Bonk Rocks. King's Tomb obviously isn't accessible without the boots, but it's kind of an odd part of the world because there's just a number of different ways to route that depending on your items.
Yeah, and very easy to end up orphaning something there. Without the boots and without the mirror, there's no chance of orphaning any of it right now because they can't get to any of it.
The Crimson in Desert, which can be a little bit of a spooky play because that item on top of the torch can lock you out of completing the dungeon. Luckily, it's just the map, which isn't really necessary for anything. I'd be surprised if we see any of our runners today open a dungeon map.
Not on purpose, anyway. Yeah, and Desert being a pendant here, there's only 2 items. I wonder if we'll see them do a full clear, maybe edging towards, hoping that it's a pendant seed. That might give them a little bit of an advantage. So this may be some of that a little less standard routing here. If you're feeling like you're behind, you could set up for something like that and just hope that...
and with Desert in particular, since it's one of the Light World dungeons, it's fairly quick. So if you go through the entire front and you find out there's an item check on the boss, I wouldn't say it's a bad play to go ahead, go back there, clear the boss out, because it can be done fairly quickly. And again, it also sets up for a potential pedestal seed. There we see our 4th sword in the right side of Desert Palace. So if we see Omega go over there, Omega's going to be set to go. Gold sword and silvers.
Yeah, this seed giving out all of the nice comfort items. With the half magic, both the Cane of Burna and the cape, gold sword accessible, silver arrows accessible.
Even a second shield upgrade. I like to have that sometimes. Block some projectiles that can become a little bit annoying at times. That was available on Zora Ledge. Our runners both decided to forego it, but...
And looking like Omega's going to make the Tower of Hera play here rather than
Omega might have
risk
picked
it
it
in
up. I don't
swamp.
recall if we saw another shield somewhere. As we can see, Omega does have that fancy, stylish red shield to match his red boomerang.
Very nice coordination. Oh, and Vortex, of course, pointing out that swamp is not accessible without the mirror. And Crimson on the right, he is going to make the dive into Mire, guaranteeing that this is going to be a double dip for Mire, because the Cane of Samario being known to be on the library ledge. But if the boots are here in Mire, this could be what they need to make up that flute difference.
Omega checking the ether tablet. I would imagine we see Tower of Hera at this point now. As nice as it would be to route that straight in at the end, you don't come up the mountain a second time and walk right past Hera.
Got our Restreamer Vortex rooting for Vanilla Boots on Saha, which would involve clearing Ice Palace and going back to Saha to get them.
Yeah, notably Ice Palace without the Cane of Samaria. Even if you don't use any strange exploits with the Cane of Samaria, it is still rather helpful in the basement because it prevents you can bypass a little loop around that the game really wants you to do for some unbelievable reason.
Seems like every Zelda game has one dungeon that is almost universally disliked, and I think for Link to the Past, Ice Palace would be the one given the vanilla route through.
Yeah, I don't mind it too much. I just dislike it because I don't personally go for Icebreaker, and so having to do it means that I'm probably just losing time versus my opponent. It really saves a lot of time. You get to do all the chests first, and then do the rest of the dungeon. Whereas with vanilla routing, you have to do the rest of the dungeon, and then you get all the chests. So you can do the math there.
Yeah, and as a community as a whole, the execution level just continues to go up. This tournament is a great example, getting a lot of newer runners, pairing them up with more experienced runners. The community is very welcoming, and it seems like everybody is learning the glitches required to speed up.
Omega takes a tumble against Moldorm. One of those bosses that either goes really well or really poorly. And you don't seem to really have any say in it. It seems you always fall, 4 or 5 times only for the final attempt to be faster than any of the ones that didn't make it. And that's what it should look like.
Yeah, doing a great job on that second attempt.
We see one of the 2 items in Misery Mire over on the right side. So Crimson opens up, finds a full heart container.
Yeah, and checking their inventory there to see if they have the map yet. Getting the bad news that they're going to have to go do cutscene chest if they want to be absolutely sure to get both items here. And speaking of going the slow route to get both items, Omega on the left going down into the coffee break room, so named, as Omega's going to show off, because you can get yourself to glitch into these pegs and just wait out the tiles without taking damage.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it a glitch to go into those pegs. It's more of an exploit of the game's mercy invincibility that it gives you if you happen to be dumb enough to stand on the pegs. It lets you be invulnerable so you can walk out of them. And you exploit that, and the tiles do their best. CrimsonPallasch similarly doing the infamous cutscene chest. You light the 4 torches, and the entire room to the right of you opens up to reveal a hole, but you can't see any of it, so you just see some rumbling for entirely too long. And we find the second item, and Crimson feeling a bit sad.
Yeah, both our runners getting bad news about their dungeons not paying off.
Yeah, now I imagine we're going to see Crimson doing the same thing, going up Tower of Hera, just to make sure that, Maybe today isn't the day that I get to route it in.
Yeah, and it's beginning to look a little more like Ice Palace may be the answer. There's not a lot of checks left available to these runners once they finish retracing each other's footsteps. And while they are retracing each other's footsteps, Crimson wanted to give a quick shout out to his wife Celestial Moogle for her support and help during this tournament, and his friends and family watching. So hello to Celestial Moogle.
And chat also having a discussion about where these boots could possibly be. We did see the shovel on Lumberjack, but since the Lumberjack check requires boots, that shovel is not going to be helping us today, which is a relief for both of these runners, I'm sure. Now, where haven't we looked? Where are we going to find this these boots?
Yeah, that's a good question. We can get to Ice Palace, and Ice Palace is full clearable, and then that would also open up the green pendant.
Yeah, it's looking like it's either... We saw both items, I believe, in Desert, or didn't we?
We saw both items in Desert.
Yeah, so we saw both items in
all
Desert.
of the Smith chain.
Yeah, and,
I think all of the other overworld checks
Turtle
are...
Rock can't be dipped into without the Cane of Samaria. Swamp Palace can't be dipped into without the Mirror. Yeah, I mean, here we see Omega going for Ice Palace. I think this is the only possible place it could be. And obviously, it could still be on the pedestal. However, we'd need to find the Mirror in Ice Palace for that.
Yeah, I think at this point the Mirror is the one item these runners do not want to see.
Funny how a seed can turn into that. You know, you get close enough to the end, and boy, the last item you want to see is the one that, in 50% of your other seeds, you're waiting on it as the last one, but you don't want to see that Mirror here, because that's gonna open up a whole bunch of other checks, and neither of them is gonna know when their opponent picks that Mirror up. Interestingly, we see Omega going into Ice Palace before having dipped into Desert Palace. Desert Palace only having 2 checks. This is slightly more rich, barely though. Definitely slower. I'm borking up that bomb throw a little bit. We also see Omega being sure to pick up that free bomb, running a little bit low.
Yeah, the fun thing about this route through Ice Palace is you do get to see some of the tricks that you don't normally see in routes these days with the Icebreaker glitch available. The Stalfos room, Omega not getting the quick kill there, and also Ice Palace bomb jump. This next room.
So far this is the Ezmar route through. It's going to diverge here a little bit. Oh nope, looks like Omega is going with the Ezmar route, not doing the Ice Palace bomb jump. A little bit risky to go for that with 2 bombs.
Meanwhile, on the right, Crimson picking up their 5th crystal from Tower of Hera and heading back in for the coffee break room.
Yeah, I really agree with the choice to not even attempt the Ice Palace bomb jump, because he's really only got one shot at it. Well, I guess not necessarily, since you don't really need to bomb the floor in this next room. Vanilla you do, but the hook shot does silly things.
And on the right, Crimson making good use of these tiles, lowering their health so that once they make the check a couple rooms over, they'll be able to do an easy death warp using the skeletons in that room.
Yeah, one change I remember, I played this game for the first time on the Game Boy Advance port that came with 4 swords. One thing I distinctly remember being possible in that version was you could just stand in the doorway and swing your sword, and the tiles couldn't do anything about it. I'm pretty sure it's not possible in this version. I haven't tried it in a while, but I think I tried it once and never tried it again.
Yeah, and Crimson on the right getting lucky there that he didn't do his death warp too soon. He just managed to dodge the mini Moldorms, get the bad news about the piece of heart in the basement, and now he's off, presumably, to Ice Palace.
Yeah, Garrison pointing out that Ice Palace is definitely the most cheated dungeon. The routing that most runners use, the big key is not even required.
Yeah, one of several dungeons that don't require the big key in Randomizer.
Logically, it still requires the big key, because the glitches that are used to bypass it are not accounted for in logic. Swamp Palace and Skull Woods being the only dungeons that logically can lock the big key away from you. Ooh, Powder, that's almost as bad as Mirror. Not quite, but that opens up Magic
it's
Bat.
just one check, and with the flute, not a terrible check to get to. I think Mirror opens up so many additional checks that would be the nightmare scenario for them here. And with every check we make here in Ice Palace and we don't see the boots, Vortex gets even more sure that his vanilla boots prediction is correct.
Yeah, that's another very good reason to go for Ice Palace over Desert Palace. Ice Palace usually has 3 chests, but any dungeon with the green pendant is worth essentially one more check.
Yeah, and at this point, the only reason to finish Desert Palace would be if you did find the mirror. You know you're going to go into Swamp Palace, but even then, I think you clear all of Swamp Palace before you even think about fighting Landmos at the back of Desert Palace.
Yeah, Desert is pretty quick. I was mentioning that earlier, but when it comes to Swamp's got a whopping 6 chests in there, so it's kind of a hard sell. We see Omega not opting to go all the way back down and fight the boss. Not a bad move. Potentially a bad move if we have vanilla boots, but all in all, not a bad decision.
Yeah, I just wonder, with so few checks left to them, it may be something that they end up regretting.
So we see Magic Bat here coming up. You can see what this scoundrel was hiding from us.
Oh, good point by Gamachu. Samaria, Coldstayer being Samaria blocked.
Yeah, without Samaria, you do have to have an extra key to enter the room with the switch that allows you to. Well, I suppose unless you do Ice Palace Bomb Jump, but you do need to have a key. So if the boss has a key, then you can find yourself out of luck without the key. Once again, boots cannot be on the flute dig spot because the boots are required to pick that shovel
And the
up.
nightmare scenario comes true. We get the fetch quest out of Ice Palace, which leads to the mirror at Magic Bat. And now there are a whole bunch of gross checks that are available to the runners.
Probably the second worst scenario right after the Helvetica.
And so which of the terrible checks are you going to first?
Though there is a silver lining to finding such an obscure mirror, the likelihood that it's looking like it's required makes it a little hard to convince yourself that your opponent did it ages ago. You know, being behind an Ice Palace dip, it's you don't feel too awful about it. You don't feel like you made a mistake necessarily. It just sucks to see.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The worst case scenario is really seeing something you could have done a long time ago. It feels a lot worse for Crimson to have seen the flute on Hobo than it did for Omega to find that mirror on Magic Bat after Ice Palace.
Yeah, particularly without having the mushroom show up. You know, if the mushroom had showed up and they turned in and chose not to save it for a fake powder, then, you know, that might have felt a little bit worse.
Yeah, but even that, we're looking for a logical required boots, so we would have needed the powder to be accessible somewhere in order for fake powder to not be a little bit of a gamble itself. Because anything that's out of logic at this stage in the game is going to be a pretty hard sell.
And it looks like on OmegAtoisk's side, we're going to see the swamp play now. Really the only thing left aside from Cave 45. Oh, and it looks like they're going to go check Cave 45 on the way.
Checkerboard as well that we haven't seen. And I think that clears up our mirror
And
checks.
Bombos.
Yeah, Bombos tablet as well. Interestingly enough, we still haven't seen Omega even go into Desert Palace. So that's starting to look like a lot of time saved. No, we may well not see that golden sword come up on the left side of our screen anytime soon. The one thing that could still be a terrible, terrible necessity would be if we have our boots on the Master Sword pedestal. That's still not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and in fact became much more likely with that mirror. Not that it's particularly likely still, but it at least became possible as soon as they found the mirror.
Oh, that's right. Vortex pointing out that since Samaria, due to the key layout, is required for Ice Palace, pedestal cannot actually be our logical progression, since pedestal cannot actually be pulled in this seed. Well, I mean, it can't be pulled until we get the King of Samaria, at which point I don't think anybody's going to be terribly interested in seeing what's on the pedestal.
I think chat's always interested in seeing what's on the pedestal.
I know I am.
You'll just have to wait for the credits.
And when I first started racing, I felt like that was a big difference between my mentality and everybody else's mentality. Is I was always just hoping for those really inconvenient seeds, looking for any opportunity to go fight Aga. It's like, oh, I'm trying to sniff it out, you know. I think it's kind of...
Yeah, I could see that.
And obviously, when it is required, the sooner you suss it out, the better. Well, actually, Crimson is sort of proving chat wrong here. Crimson seems to be making his way relatively unimpeded to Cold Stare.
Yeah, it's
possible
logically
that Omega had a
it's
subpar usage of keys, but that does mean that since it is possible to lock yourself out with Samaria, Samaria must be logically accessible before you can mess up the keys. So Crimson potentially going on a little bit of a wild.
Yeah, if you remember, Omega didn't do the Ice Palace bomb jump, which meant that they couldn't push the block down with their key layout.
Yeah, I didn't. I missed the bomb jump on the right side. Which props to Crimson for landing that, but unfortunately, it's not going to pay off. It's a good to cover the bases though. That's it's not a bad play to make. Unfortunately, they sort of deprive themselves of the information that they're bypassing. Yeah, very fast Cold Stare fight. I blink.
Yeah, half magic and a fire rod will do that, along with the bombos, so they're able to save a lot of magic up front and really just melt Cold Stare down.
And we're gonna see the pendant turn in on the right side. The look of despair as we see Diver down on our left side in Swamp Palace. You can see the bomb setup here, obviously, because the other setup is quite
Diver down being number 10 on the 10 Rando Tricks Worth Learning 2020 edition.
And also number 3 in the chronological list of Van Halen. Of course, after Van Halen's 1 and...
Of course. Who doesn't know that? So Omega, having built a pretty healthy lead at this point, Crimson is going to pick up the mirror, and best case, they go right to Swamp with the mirror. But Omega is the back of Swamp here, finishing things up. They've got quite a lead.
Seeing that mirror come up at this point now, it's a little bit spookier. But again, like I mentioned earlier, Crimson doesn't necessarily have a reason to believe that Omega would have picked up that mirror that much earlier, since given how obscure it was. Any lead that they're feeling is most likely due to that flute earlier. We see the Argus fight on the left side here. I personally would have gone for a silver arrow myself, but seems neither of these runners are interested in polluting the Hyrule's waterways with too much silver.
Yeah, and no boots so far. So we've got left side of Swamp still remaining here, yes, and the big chest. Yeah, and Crimson really not catching the logic from Ice Palace, going to check the pedestal, getting the bad news, just a little piece of love.
Yeah, and that's also I'm gonna put some of the blame for that on Crimson's mentor as well, because that's one of the things that the mentors are supposed to be helping their runners catch, but unfortunately slips right by both of them.
But it really just goes to show just how much there is to learn in Rando.
And we have a privileged perspective here, because we got to see Omega, fall victim to that key logic, whereas from Crimson's perspective, it's a very slight detail, and you got to be paying close attention to catch it. And at this stage in a race, they don't have that luxury, and we find the boots in the big chest.
Yep, and so in just a couple of seconds here, Omega will be officially in go mode.
And I don't think we're going to be seeing that Butter Sword. It won't make that much difference. Tempered Sword and Butter Sword are functionally identical when it comes to the Ganon fight.
That's right. Yeah, Butter Sword can speed up, make it a little easier to get a 1+1 in the first couple of phases, but in the final phases, it doesn't make a lick of difference.
Yeah, once you've got enough practice on that fight, the Golden Sword doesn't really do much more than make it easier. It doesn't speed it up too much, but it definitely makes it a little bit. You barely have to pay attention to it if you've got the Gold Sword.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Crimson on the right, retracing all the steps that OmegAtoisk took, getting all of the extraneous mirror checks before heading to CrimsonPallasch. Yeah, the other benefit we have is having someone like Gamachu, who has boatloads of experience running Rando, in the chat, able to point out the key logic for us.
Yeah, we basically have our own wide host of mentors here.
Yeah, and OmegAtoisk, as he's clearing out Misery Mire here, noticing that they did not dip into Misery Mire earlier, so this is another time save that they have over Crimson, who already went into Mire once, hoping to find the item that they needed, and Omega's just going to make one trip in here.
And they already find the big key. They know they don't need anything else out of here, and this is about as quick as it gets for Misery Mire. Now this room that we were sort of postulating might have to be done in the dark there in Mire, is a little bit this whole dark section is a little bit notorious. There's no torches to light, and you have to move pretty precisely, and you don't really know where you're gonna be. You take a hit, you can't see your sword beams anymore. It's a little bit of a doozy.
Yeah, absolutely. And another good example of the kind of information that runners in the tournament can pick up. We had a mentor in the Discord point out a setup for that room in the dark and posted a video of it that even some of the other mentors were happy to see and learn a more consistent way to do that room in the dark. So the learning doesn't stop with just the racers, it seems.
And we see the silver is finally being used in Misery Mire. Dark World pollution is not nearly as undesirable. And a quick kill onto Vitreous. The big.
Yeah, the zero cycle, very satisfying to watch. Meanwhile, Crimson is going to pick up their Butter Sword, going over to check Catfish before going into Swamp.
Yeah, at this point, it's not gonna save them alone. They're gonna need a little more than that. They've essentially got to hope for misplays on Omega's side.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why they're putting off Swamp as long as they are, figuring that at this point they need their opponent to have orphaned an important check and forgotten about it.
There is one thing. As we approach our final dungeon and the GT Tower climb, one thing comes to mind that could save Crimson here. And I think people familiar with me might know exactly to what I am alluding. But it is the Go Mode tile room in Ganon's Tower. If it were me, that's the strategy I would employ here. It's about the only thing that could save enough time to make up this sizable lead now that Omega's got.
Yeah, that is definitely a Hail Mary.
It is such an interesting one though. I might talk about it a little later when it becomes relevant or not. But it's so easily accessible that you can finish it. You can check that chest so quickly, but that individual chest itself takes so long that you save more time in the long run by checking it last every single time. But when you've got that time to make up, you got basically a 5% chance, a little less. And sometimes you like those.
Yeah, and the other piece of it that has to go into that thinking is that the seed is, as we've talked about, has given you all of the comfort items. And so you can't expect that your opponent has had too much trouble getting through these dungeons, getting past the bosses.
No, for sure not. I know if I'm approaching Ganon's Tower and I've got the Master Sword and no silvers, sometimes I can hope that maybe my opponent really wants to see one of those two items, spent a lot of time looking for them. Maybe I can just trust my execution to get it done, but in this case, that's not a luxury either of them are going to have.
Right, and even Darkroom's not going to be a gatekeeper here with the lamp being so easily accessible.
Now, we might see Crimson not skip left side swamp here. That could make up a little bit of time. But they may still be operating under the... Oh, no, they did check the pedestal, so they may make the play to do left side here, rather than leave it until later. It can be risky, since it does eat up a lot of time if it's not what you're looking for.
Right, and we know that will just put them even a little further behind.
Right. Sometimes, similar to that, though, I will... If I know I'm looking for an item and I see the big key, I don't remember where we saw the big key, but sometimes if I see it, I'll turn around and open up the big chest before diving back in after the boss. It only takes
I think it was in Waterfall Room, if I remember correctly.
It only takes a couple of times for that important item to actually be on that last on the big chest for you to start thinking about whether or not you want to leave it. Yeah, and Omega with a very clean Turtle Rock, so. And Crimson not skipping the left side swamp. Feeling a bit too unsafe right now. And not feeling like anything is worth skipping at this point.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Omega, Go Mode Turtle Rock not really giving any speed up here with the big key chest being vanilla in the lava room. They might be able to skip a couple checks on the backside here going down towards Laser Bridge. But so far, it's a pretty standard Turtle Rock.
Yeah, for all of its entry requirements, though, Turtle Rock is not it feels a lot longer and larger when you first start out, but after a while, it really doesn't take as long as you remember it taking. It's relatively straightforward. Occasionally you get the opportunity to skip Laser Bridge entirely, and sometimes it's, a treasure trove.
Yeah, and certainly knowing where everything is, knowing the correct route through the platform maze in the basement, that helps to speed things up compared to when I was a 10-year-old and playing this. And so while Omega is making their way through the rest of Turtle Rock and Crimson is about to find their boots, I want to give a shout out and thanks to our Restreamer Vortex of Doom, to our tracker Forcebev, who has been doing a phenomenal job this whole time, keeping us up to date on what items they've checked, what dungeons they've cleared. And thanks to you, Ezmar, this has been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, we've only got this is looking to wrap up in the next 20 minutes or so, barring any major catastrophe in Ganon's Tower. Interestingly, we see Crimson forego the diver down, perhaps not comfortable with the bomb setup. A lot of people know the Cane of Samaria setup is a little bit more straightforward. We might see a little bit of tech here in the switch maze. See if the placement's good enough. Oh, it hits the pokey. If you stick the block in the right spot there, it can hit two switches, flip the switch off, back on, let you through. Everything's ready to go, but messes it up a little bit.
It's the thought that counts.
And we're gonna have a comfy Tempered Sword Trinexx fight here. Now, making sure that Omega switches to the Fire Rod before delivering the final hit, as the menu cannot be opened during the cutscene of the head exploding into smithereens there.
And just a couple slashes away from getting the 7th crystal.
Yeah, it seems a little fortuitous that the Turtle Rock is the final dungeon, because you just walk right over to Ganon's Tower, but somehow it seems like 9 times out of 10 that's where it ends up anyway. There's usually, for as many checks as it has, it's not common for you to need to go to Turtle Rock before something else.
Yeah, which makes sense given the entrance requirements. You need the hammer, a medallion, ice rod, fire rod, cane of Samaria. So by the time you can get in and clear all of Turtle Rock, you've really had to have checked a lot of the world already.
Yeah, every so often you'll see required flute or mirror in Turtle Rock.
And with the
That's all that
7th
comes to mind.
crystal, we've already started in chat our big key guessing game. There are 22 checks in Ganon's Tower, and you have a few seconds left to get your guess in as to where you think OmegAtoisk will find the big key.
I guess 3 every time, hoping against hope that they're going to go with my favorite strategy. It never happens, but the one time it does, it's going to feel so good. It's going to
And
feel
what is your
so
favorite
good to have called
strategy?
it. Hope room into tile room. I don't. Oh, there we go. 1. That wasn't very exciting, was it?
Barely had time to get the game going and barely had time to see the game execute. Just a quick trip down the left side to pick up a small key, and they'll be climbing up to Aga.
And that reason specifically is why you generally see people dive down that right side first. The left side is a little bit more rich in checks, but you do feel a little bit foolish if you finish all of left side and find it in one of those first two chests in the what is referred to as Hope Room there. Oh, and see, my strategy seems to have paid off. I ended up guessing the lowest of anybody. I don't feel satisfied because it wasn't where I hoped it would be, but
Points are points.
this is sort of stands in stark contrast to perhaps the longest GT big key guessing game that we saw a few weeks ago. Restreamer Vortex was playing in that game, if I recall. Both runners ended up going up into Ganon's tower, only to find out that though Misery Mire and Turtle Rock had not been required, Samaria was needed to access the power big key, so they had to leave and come back.
Oh boy, that's not something anybody wants to do.
It was good fun to watch, though. I will say that. And we've got basically the formality of Ganon's tower climb here. Get to see how well Omega's execution is during this gauntlet. That's very nice in that Beamos room with the blue horse heads.
Based on Vortex's reaction in the chat, they may still be traumatized from that race you referred to. And we get our first glimpse at Lanmo this time. One silver arrow to each should
Messes
take
up
them
the aim
down.
a little bit.
Easier said than done with the timing.
There can be an element of luck to it as well if you decide to compensate for your timing by trying to predict where its movements are going to be. Since its movements are generally entirely random, the prediction is a little bit tough to do.
Yeah, and the timing in that second Lanmo fight is a little trickier, given that there's quite a bit of lag in that room, so it can make timing your arrow shots a little bit more difficult than usual.
And Crimson enters the Vitreous fight. Takes down the eyeballs.
Also pulling off the zero cycle, very nice, quick fight.
Oh, and Omega screwing up that second Wizrobe room a little bit. I think that's a 3 cycle, maybe.
Yeah, Wizard's being quite rude to him today.
Now, I haven't been keeping track of bottle contents, but Omega a little bit low on health here. Decides to dive up that staircase pretty quick. Of course, not needing the magic refill. Sometimes you want to take that magic refill just to stall for time to make sure you don't get the glitch where you despawn the rest of the tower.
Yeah, I've never seen that myself, but it sounds like the worst possible scenario in a race.
Yeah, there's a strange interaction with the fairly unique animation of going up that staircase and the door closing off screen on the unloaded screen. Messes around with the memory, presumably, and you don't get to see any enemies for the rest of the tower, and that includes the boss, which is pretty much the only thing you really need to defeat. An opening validation chest just for us. 3 bombs.
And everybody get your protractors out for the Aga 2 fight. As Crimson on the right, opening up Turtle Rock, about to go get their final crystal.
That first pattern was pretty good. Second pattern, not so kind. Very good third
Six hits will
pattern.
will take him down. Although there is some RNG with the blue balls, both of our runners should get the same patterns here.
Yeah, Omega gets it in 4 cycles.
I feel like for me, anything less than 6 cycles is a win.
I generally don't even count my hits on my bosses. I just hit them until they die. It's not as you don't get to plan that way, but again, I'm making a poignant philosophical statement. We see Omega opting to take out the cape for some extra insurance against these fireballs. Get some great double spins in on Ganon. It's going to be a very fast second phase.
Yeah, taking down the second phase in 1 cycle. So it's a 2+1. Very quick.
That's really not doable without those double spins if you've only got tempered. You usually will need 2 cycles unless you get something like that. I'm going for the bonus bonus freeze hit here. It doesn't look like he quite got it. Not too concerned about missing the torch glitch.
No, and went with a green potion in hand and silver arrows.
Now, an interesting note about double hits on Ganon is if Ganon hits a wall, you won't be able to hit him again. So it's sometimes worth it if you freeze him in a position like that to walk around the side, just like Omega did there, and try to go for 2 hits. Sometimes you eat up a little bit too much time like that, and doesn't quite come off. But there we go, the final hit. Time's coming up in just a few seconds here.
Get your GGs ready in chat.
In time.
GGs to OmegAtoisk, coming in at 153.
And that brings his record to 2-2 from the 1 and 2 that both of these runners were at. Unfortunately, although Crimson doesn't know it yet, he's going to fall to 1 and 3.
Yeah, if he's got the race room open or if his mentor is keeping an eye on it, I'm sure he'll get the news quickly. We'll see if we can get OmegAtoisk in here for an interview. As Crimson finishes up Turtle Rock here, going through Crystal Roller Room. Really the difference, as we said earlier, the flute made a big difference. That allowed OmegAtoisk to build a little bit of a lead here.
Yeah, it was down to that when each runner decided to do those flippers checks. Crimson put them off just a little bit too long. And we see Crimson going around the right side here on the dark platform maze. I'm not sure if that's faster, but it's certainly the easiest route to do in the.
And we've got Omega and Trinexx here. GG's, guys. Good race.
Good game to Omega.
Thank you.
So first question for you. When you were going to Magic Bet, is there any item that you wanted to see less than the mirror at that point?
No, I was really looking. Oh crap! I have double audio. Sorry, I had double audio tripping. No, that mirror was really hiding hard, and we were starting to think that was just going to be mirrorless seed. Just waiting for the boots hiding. Well, they were kind of hiding.
Yeah, the mirror.
We were saying this.
I would say, I think we were talking about that. If it was anywhere but Ice Palace, it was kind of one of those definitely like, I don't know how to feel about this types of things, but it was.
Yeah, I pointed out that you certainly don't expect that your opponent did that way before you did. It's pretty well hidden.
Yeah, and with that in mind, how
Have to
did you
have-
feel when you hit go mode? Did you feel like you were maybe ahead? Were you feeling behind at that point?
I was definitely feeling behind, coming up on 2 hours, and still kind of looking for something big. It's like the cane was locked behind library, which is locked behind boots. It's just a really annoying wall that you could see over, but you just couldn't get around it or through it.
Yeah, the big difference maker ended up being that that early trip around the flippers checks ended up getting you that flute a lot sooner. Crimson found it probably, I don't know, half an hour later at least.
Oof.
I can't even remember what the flute was now. It's just.
It was on Hobo.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing we noticed fairly early on in this seed is that it threw a lot of the comfort items at you. Very early silver arrows. It gave you both the cape and the cane of Burna. Sword upgrades were fairly easy to come by. So, a lot of the execution was maybe a little bit less scary. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, nothing I really was doing felt too uncomfortable when I was doing it in the moment. Like I'm not 100% with the Ice Palace bomb jump, but thankfully Trinexx was able to kind of guide me to avoid it and still clear the dungeon fairly fast.
Yeah, one thing interesting that's about that Ice Palace bomb jump is since you didn't do it, you ended up realizing that the entire dungeon was in fact locked behind the Cane of Samaria. Crimson, on the other hand, ended up executing the bomb jump and going ahead to clear the dungeon. And by extension, they ended up checking the
Green pendant?
They didn't pull the pedestal, but they checked the green pendant and they went up and they used the book to read the pedestal because they hadn't realized that it could not logically be required for those boots. So how did that sort of play out on your guys' side when you ended up running out of keys?
I honestly wasn't 100% with it. I was kind of just following Trinexx at that point because I was avoiding Ice Palace just because I knew I didn't have the cane. I didn't want to touch it without having it because I don't know it that well. I'm sure you've seen I definitely I went down to the basement room without the small key, and I just kind of I lollygagged a bit.
But it's something that you did discuss, that the boss was out of logic due to being Samaria locked.
Yeah,
we were keeping track of keys on his behalf, and I think once we got to the hookshot lock side, we were hoping to not see it, so we didn't have to go into do cold stare and whatnot there. But the moment we saw the compass, I was just telling them, bail out, we're good, we're done. And that kind of blocked off a whole bunch of checks for us, so that was good.
Yeah, unfortunately, neither Crimson or his mentor ended up noticing that, since they did go on to defeat the boss, check the green pendant. That kind of slipped past them when they were doing their Ice Palace.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you secrets break Ice Palace so much you just barely think of the logic sometimes.
Yeah, we see that important stuff on the stream here. How about that GT Big Key, huh?
Yeah, I pretty much I crapped myself when I saw it. I
was postulating that would be one of the only ways for Crimson to make up a substantial amount of time, and it's like, well, doesn't look like there's any time to be saved here.
I mean, it looks like he's following my suit up there, so he'll be clearing it just as fast.
Yeah, he'll be coming up on the end pretty quickly, but yeah, it mostly seems to have come down to that, long wait on those flippers checks.
Yeah, you guys were very much in lockstep for the first, I'd say, half an hour, 45 minutes of the seed, where you're doing all of the same checks, including the quick dip into Thieves Town and then death warping out. You were within seconds of each other, and then suddenly it diverged with you doing those flipper checks, and that allowed you to really just build a lead through the rest of the seed.
That was a smooth one cycle on those second whiz robes by Crimson.
What did he do in the divergence when I went to do the flipper checks? Where did he go?
He went straight up to Mountain, if I recall, and found unfortunately very little up there, and ended up not ending up putting any of those mountain checks in logic until finding the lamp in Hyrule Castle.
Yeah, I think it was the mountain only had that basically a hammer and a sword. That was surprisingly rare.
Hammer and a sword upgrade. And the last sword upgrade, which you see that Crimson has, was in Desert, which
yeah, that makes sense.
He also checked before finding that flute.
Oh, damn.
Or no, it wasn't before finding the flute. It was right after finding the flute because he just picked up the book. So
that's right. And he also did a dip of mire, which you managed to avoid.
Oh yeah, I got lucky. I don't think I touched Desert either.
No, it didn't even enter.
Yeah, so the routing choice is paying off.
I think we were discussing at some point that while we're in the boots hunt mode, there wasn't really a good decision to make. Like getting to Hera at the time was like the slow way. So even though it was a crystal, it was like not a good option. And it was just like a couple of odd things here and there. So we just kind of told them to group them as best they could.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, it could be in Ice Palace. But at the same time, it's like, at what point do you decide that it couldn't be somewhere else? Yeah, Crimson coming up on advanced geometry class here. See if he can beat the 4 cycle. There were some pretty good patterns. A little bit of unfortunate blue balls from Ogdenham here.
So I'm curious, Omega, is there anything that you learned from Trinexx in this race that you'll be able to put to use in future weeks?
Definitely, yeah. Just getting to know more of the logic in dungeons that I'm either just clearing fully or I'm just go moding. It's nice to know like actual key logic to piece the dungeon together like he did, because I, like in Ice Palace, I had no idea that it was Samaria locked or anything like that. He was the one that was kind of like, hey, the key's there, the compass is there, you're done here, so get out.
Ice Palace is one of the most mutable dungeons in terms of routes and requirements. It can sometimes require the hookshot, sometimes can require the Cane of Samaria, and depending on which keys you find where, you kind of have to change the way you go through it. And a lot of the time, if you're used to just doing Icebreaker every time, you don't ever have to deal with that. So that can be something that the experience really pays off with.
As we see Crimson here dropping into his Ganon fight. A lovely teal shade of Ganon today.
Yes, the rooms match the match its occupant.
Whoa.
Going for a little bit of cape strats here. on to the third phase. That's the magic of the golden sword here. And this should be over momentarily, barring an uncharacteristic fall. Does get the early hit before the torches go out. 2 early hits. Or no, I guess he relit the torch. It was pretty swift, almost too swift to see. And that's the final hit. Once the door opens, we are ready to go.
Get your GGs ready in chat. And that's a GG to Crimson, finishing with a 2:07.
Yeah, the official time here for OmegAtoisk is 1:53:21, beating out CrimsonPallasch with 2:07:03. And we're gonna see if we can get them into the green room here for an interview in just a second here. So if you'll hang tight.
Omega, any last shout outs you want to do? Trinexx?
Big shout out to Vortex, the man, Restreaming, doing what he does. The commentators, volume telling their time, the tracker. I'm sorry, I'm not. I don't know who's who, but
That's all right. The tracker is brand new here, so she's done a wonderful job.
here we go. McMonkey, Ezmar, Forcebev. The true MVPs.
Yeah, and if you liked what you saw in the race here, give our runners a follow. You can see the links in chat.
And here we've got Crimson and CJ. I let me ask CJ first off. Is it SEJay or CJ?
Either works, but usually CJ.
Okay, because I kind of awkwardly avoided it a couple of times during the during the cast. So.
That's fine. Don't even worry about it.
But yeah, how about that? How about that powder though?
Do you want to know where something was? Because we checked pretty much everything.
Yeah, about the only thing we didn't see was the mushroom.
Yeah, and even then you couldn't fake powder because reasons.
That Kane was busy laughing at us
Absolutely.
on top of the library shelf.
Yeah, I'm guessing the mushroom was buried in the grove. That's gonna be my guess. So if you really wanted to grab that mushroom, you gotta go fight the wizard.
Yeah.
So we asked Omega the same. Was there anything that you wanted to see less than the mirror when you got to Magic Bat?
Anything less? I mean, probably if we got the mushroom, that would have been the most undesirable thing to find there.
Yeah, even then, there's a little bit of hope still, but you're
Yeah.
still in the same situation.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts when you finally did see that mirror? Or I guess a better question would be, what were your thoughts when you found the flute?
Our thoughts when we found the flute, because that was what we found in Ice Palace, correct?
No, the flute was what you found on
No.
Hobo.
Oh, on Hobo. You know, honestly, really the thought that just kept coming to us was CJ just had this gut feeling that we needed to go into Ice Palace sooner, and ultimately the decision fell on me, and I'm like, no, let's go ahead and head up to Tower of Hera. So, you know, it's like once we found the flute, okay, you know, that gives us access into Meyer for the Meyer shed, but really it's like it just kept coming back to we really should have gone into Ice Palace sooner.
Yeah, I think I first brought up diving Ice Palace about 25 minutes into the seed because of the items we had gotten, but it just never felt like the right time. It always seemed like there was at least one more thing we could do real quick before diving Ice, and we just put it off too long.
Yeah, another thing that ended up making a huge difference is I brought up the flute because you ended up picking that up at least half an hour later than Omega did, and with it the book, and that sort of put Omega in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were just kind of hoping that Omega was kind of doing some of the same checks as us. But this, I mean, this seed was just kind of a... It taunted us so much early on, and then we just found it withholding. As we're trying to find that mirror, it's like, where's that mirror? Where are the boots? Okay, we need the boots. And, oh, it was brutal, but...
We kind
I
of
think considering how much we actually did, clearing it in the time that we did was pretty substantial.
we kind of backed ourselves into a bad corner too, because we basically were, we found a lot of things and we're very easily boots from go mode, and so we really didn't want to have to check like pendants and things like that. We were just hoping that the boots were going to show up somewhere in the overworld. So even when we found the mirror, it was like, okay, well, if it's in swamp, like, this is not good. So let's check the overworld, because at least, people would probably check swamp first. At that point, we were feeling like, we need to make some gambles here, because the only gamble that really paid off was that early trip up Death Mountain. And other than that, like our Mire dive and our Desert Palace dive, like none of them seem to be paying off. So it's just one of those seeds where, you make gambles.
At the seed, you always hope that it's not going to be.
Yeah.
When you see those items. One thing that we actually brought up, I think when you were both walking over towards Eastern, was, okay, what do you usually think when you see that many items that soon? And I usually think, okay, this looks really nice, but I know that it's going to slow down to a crawl later on when you've got all of the checks open, and you've just got to pick where you want to guess that the next thing you need is.
Yeah, especially I've never had a seed that's given me both gloves in the same room. And, you start seeing something like that, and you feel really good initially, but then you're like, it does end up slowing down somewhere along the road, and for us, it turned out to be those doggone boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often find the seeds that have a slower start end up, they sort of end up funneling you down the route a lot more reliably, but the seeds where you get a lot of the great items all really early, well then where do you follow? There's no breadcrumbs.
Crimson
It's anybody's game after that slows down.
Crimson actually asked, like, right when we were about to go to Thieves Town or something like that, he's like, what does the seed like say to you when you get like all of these items? And I remember at that moment saying, Skullwoods or Ice Palace, like, that's where we're gonna have to go. So pretty early on, it was pretty obvious. We just didn't stick to it.
So was there any point during Ice Palace, well, clearly not during, but after Ice Palace, that you realized that, as Gamachu pointed out in chat during the race, that it was Samaria locked? Cold Stare was Samaria locked due to the key logic. There was some speculation about whether CJ should have known that. You clearly didn't, having turned in the green pendant and then checked PED. Was there an aha moment at any point, or was that something that you didn't even...
No, that was just something I lost track of when we were going through it.
I mean, considering this is his, third race today?
Yeah.
That was pointed out as well.
I did kind of book myself that this was my third mentor race today, so my brain is a little bit fried. But no, we were going through ice, and I think... I'm trying to think of exactly what happened, but when we went over to left side, or when we found the third item, for some reason I thought that Cold Stare was going to have a compass when Cold Stare had a small key, right? Like, for some reason in my head I thought we hadn't found compass. Like, I just switched items up in my head when we were going through it, and so I thought, well, maybe, with that. And then I didn't see what the Cold Stare drop was, because I had like a little glitch on Discord, and so I didn't see that it was small key. And yeah, that's kind of what led to those checks. If I had paid attention to either of those, it would have been a lot easier to say, okay, well, let's just leave the dungeon now and not worry about PED.
Well, and I also think that considering I was having some stream issues there early on, I know there were a couple of times where he had to go back to viewing my stream instead of my screen share, and sometimes he may already have something, but I've already committed to something because there's that little bit of a lag.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't think there were very many people who picked up on that logic. We were lucky to have Gamachu in the chat and point it out, but I would hazard a guess that very few people who were watching, and probably zero of the people commentating, would have picked up on that logic without it being pointed out.
No, I should have picked up on it. I just, honestly, I'm being perfectly honest, I thought that we were missing a compass, not a small key. And
that was the one thing that Trinexx said clued him in, is when they saw the compass, that was their cue to get out, because they forewent the Ice Palace bomb jump since they were short on bombs a little bit. They only had 2.
Oh, I told Crimson he could, but he wanted to do it for swag.
Hey, this seed didn't really give me much opportunity to show off some of my tricks. I had to do one at least.
Right, a lot of the more popular glitches were just not really available.
Hey, there was at least bomb diver down. That was the option.
Yeah, and that's the only diver down I can't pull off right now. One of these days, I'll be able to get it. But, I mean, GG's. Omega, Trinexx, you guys did a great job. I think SEJay and I pulled off the best seed that we could have, considering some of the choices that he left in my hands.
Yeah, GG's to both of our runners. And any other final thoughts? Yeah, either of our runners.
I mean, nothing beyond that. This seed just kind of smoked me, but, I gave it my all, put my best out there, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I think on the terrible route that I sent him on, he did a pretty good job.
Some of those decisions were mine that I made.
It's all right. Is not the best seed, but it happens.
Yeah, I've played worse. Not by much, but I played worse.
Yeah, SEJay and I made some comments about how at least this wasn't the bi-weekly seed.
Absolutely, that was a doozy this time around.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, this is the last race of this week of the Mentor tournament, with the later race having an unfortunate forfeit. So we'll be the next time we'll be streaming on the Go Mode podcast channel. We'll be into week 5, which is another open seed week with a mentor. So the schedule at the moment is TBD until the runners get their pairings, but we can look forward to some more streams later on this week. And I want to thank both of the runners and my Restreamer, my commentator partner, Ezmar. Thank you very much. This was a great race, a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Also, like to thank our tracker and Restreamer, Forcebev and Vortex. And yeah, if you're interested in this at all, give Go Mode Podcast a follow. Give all of our commentators, runners, mentors, Restreamer, tracker. Give everybody a follow. Spread those follows around. It doesn't cost anything. But yeah, we'll be seeing you again next week.
Good game, everyone. Have a good one.
Yeah, take it easy.
GG's all around.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Vortex. CJ, yeah. Yeah, it seemed to go without a hitch. I mean, yeah, I left it on the race scene instead of the final one.